normally happens. Anyway, it's the Yellowhammer contingency plan, which of course outlines the series of what's described as reasonable worst-case assumptions if the UK leaves the EU without a deal at the end of October. That's the focus for our Ask This Today. The document warns of potential riots on the streets, food price rises and reduced medical supplies. And we were just focusing there specifically on what it could potentially mean for Northern Ireland. Well, we've been asking for your questions on the government's planning for a no-deal Brexit and what could happen if Britain leaves without an agreement. So to help us answer some of your questions, I'm joined in the studio by Anand Menon, Director of the UK in a Changing Europe. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, lots of people getting in touch about the availability of vital medicines, including Harvey Pope. He's emailed asking, I have type 1 diabetes and my insulin is manufactured in Denmark. What assurances can be given that supplies will not run out? And why shouldn't I be stockpiling in case of supply issues?
Well, I can't give specific advice on specific drugs. What I will say is if you look at Yellowhammer, what is quite clear is the government thinks we could face shortages of medicines. They talk about the fact that medical supplies are very, very dependent on what they call the short straits, which is Dover-Calais. They're predicting a potential decrease in traffic across that border by 40% on day one, and saying that therefore, not least because some medicines have to be transported in specific ways, we might well see shortages of medicines. So the government itself is saying you can't rule this out.
And whenever there is a concern about potential shortages, the first message from the government is please don't stockpile because it makes things worse. But Harvey's obviously considering it, and there'll be many others who do not want to risk running out of vital medical supplies. What impact does stockpiling have?
Well, all sorts of impacts. I mean, one of the things that this document talks about is the danger of panic buying by consumers in shops. Ironically enough, that might mitigate some of the economic impacts of no deal in the sense that you might get this surge in spending and you get this surge in government spending on no deal as well. But it could lead to shortages. I mean, what is clear from this document is the government cannot rule out shortages of medicines, certain food types. And in that sense, this is a remarkable document because government is saying we are perfectly fine with no deal.
Greg Hawes, in the event of a no-deal Brexit, how will Britons living in the EU who have uninsurable pre-existing medical conditions access treatment?
This is a really tough one. Though obviously those Brits that have got citizenship in those countries are fine because they'll enjoy the rights of a citizen. Those who haven't at the moment, there are no arrangements in place. The British government has been talking to EU member states, for instance, about letting us pay for the treatment of EU nationals there. The EU to date has refused to accept this. So there is no easy answer to that, I'm afraid. It will be very hard.
Danraj Dota from St Albans asks, what is going to be the impact of a no-deal Brexit on Europeans already residing in the UK?
In principle, none. Because their rights are already assured and the government has made it clear that the rights of those who are here before we leave are enshrined in law. What is interesting is that the government is going to change the system for those who arrive after that date. The problem is government has no way of knowing who was here beforehand and who isn't, because we really don't know who the EU nationals in this country are now. So I expect a huge amount of administrative confusion, should we leave with no deal, about who was here when.
Michael Francis in Manchester says, I want to know what point number 15 is. Why is it still blacked out? I mean, it's a bit odd, isn't it? Because basically the document was leaked previously, so you can just compare and contrast with what did come out before.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know for certain if they've changed it since, so I'm not going to hazard a guess about this. But all I can say is in terms of PR, it is dreadful because you look at it and assume the worst, given everything that's there. It is curious. And of course, this is something that the government was reluctant to release, only released it because of a humble address in Parliament, was essentially forced to do so by MPs.
So, I mean, well, according to the original leak in August, and as you say, maybe it's changed, but it was talking about petrol supplies and basically the potential also for job losses in the fuel industry. Yeah,
and I think if you read this document as a whole, even without the bit on fuel, you can see the potential for job losses, not least as you were just hearing about Northern Ireland.
An anonymous questioner asks, why would some adult social care providers fail in a no-deal scenario?
Well, one of the concerns about social care is overstaffing, because particularly in the southeast, the sector is staffed to a significant extent by EU nationals, and we've seen a drop-off in the number of those people coming here. We've seen some of them leaving, and therefore staffing in some of these homes is going to become a real issue.
Christopher Norris, an entrepreneur in London, has tweeted, if the UK leaves the EU, is there legal provision to do so on a trial basis, a try-before-you-buy scheme that would revert to remain if Yellowhammer's predictions prove correct? That's a good business question, I guess, but, absolutely no chance.
The short answer is no. You're either a member state or you're not. As soon as you're not a member state, you can reapply to join, but you can't simply slip back into how we were before.
Peter from Kent is worried about the impact on traffic in Kent. He says, I live near the M20, it's bad enough now, so if this comes in, we'll be stuck as it'll be gridlock trying to get to London from Kent. The traffic will divert and it will have a big effect on the community and people trying to get to London. The government are keeping the information away from us. I don't trust Boris Johnson at all. Yellowhammer is the average one and theirs is one called Black Swan, which sounds even worse. How worried should he be?
Well, based on this, quite worried, because as I said, they're talking about a 40% decrease in flow across the short straits, and that traffic is going to back up somewhere. Colleagues at Imperial a couple of years ago did a study of this, and it only takes relatively short delays at Dover to lead to massive tailbacks. And in terms of what the government is saying, there is a tension within the government position that it's worth mentioning here, because on the one hand, you have documents like this, and the government is asking people to prepare for no deal, asking businesses to fill out the necessary paperwork. On the other hand, the official position of the government is no deal will be absolutely fine. It's not our policy preference, but if we get it, it'll be absolutely fine. And there's a slight tension between the two, and I sense that people are saying, well, if it's going to be fine, why should we prepare? If it's not, if we should make all these preparations, can you guarantee that it's going to be fine?
What's Black Swan? This is the worst case scenario, isn't it?
Well, government is saying that this was the worst case scenario, but it has been updated. There are rumours of another document called Black Swan lurking in the corridors, which paints an even darker picture, but I'd be reluctant to comment on it because I haven't seen it. I've just heard rumours about it.
Thank you very much, Anand.